everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to introduce you to the smallest bird that I work with. His name is Hiccup and he is a little owl. Hiccup is nearly 3 years old now and I bred him myself, so it's quite nice having homebred birds because obviously you know where they've come from and you know the parents, and he has been quite a little fun part of my life. Although we don't use owls as falconry birds, we do often end up working with them, and it can be really beneficial for when we're working with wild owls. So I bred Hiccup about 3 years ago and he's been with me ever since he was a teeny tiny little chick. And he has his name for a very specific reason. When I bred him, it was the first year that I was breeding little owls, and I wanted to let the parents get on with it themselves to see how successful they would be and how natural they would be as parents. So I left the eggs in and the mum laid 7 eggs, which is a huge clutch for little owls. Typically 3 to 5 eggs is a lot more common, and she obviously struggled to sit all those eggs, but she did actually manage to keep most of those eggs fertile. Now I monitored every few days just to check that the eggs were doing fine and largely just left them to it. When it came to hatching, I was noticing that I wasn't hearing or seeing chicks when I went to check, and I could hear pipping inside the eggs when I listened, but nothing was happening. At this point it is quite a hard choice to make, but I really wanted to let the parents get on with it and I didn't want to disturb them too much. So eventually I went in when I knew that at least half the clutch should be born, and it was very apparent that this wasn't the case. So very luckily for Hiccup, he was the only chick that I was actually able to go in and open his egg up, which is not something we do very commonly. You'll have seen me explain the reasons for going in and helping and assisting chicks in a hatch process, but I knew that what was really important was that we got this chick out. If I hadn't manually helped him out of the egg, he wouldn't have survived. And sadly his siblings didn't make it, thus the name Hiccup, because you were a bit of an accident. Now the weather has been absolutely rubbish the last few weeks. I've struggled to get new birds free flying. The winds have just been too high. We've had days and days of rain and we're still due more. However, today we've had a bit of a break in the rain, so it is at least sunny. However, it's still very windy. So I'm taking the opportunity today to still be able to fly him, but by being a bit more creative. It really pays off to have an indoor space like this one around me, and it means that I can fly Hiccup without taking him outside where he's going to hurt himself. As you can imagine, if you weigh 170 grams, you have very little option in the wind, and he is absolutely rubbish. It's like throwing a paper bag in the breeze when he tries to fly. Hi, you ready? So little owls were introduced into the UK at some point in the early 1900s, and they established a really good wild population. However, we are now finding that they're in decline, and this is most likely due to habitat loss and reduction in the food that they can actually catch. They mainly eat small insects and small rodents, although they are known for catching small birds in the breeding season, probably when they're getting a bit more desperate for finding quantities of food. But generally they can't handle huge amounts of prey. He only weighs about 170 grams, so he doesn't weigh very much at all, and is by far the smallest or lightest bird that I work with. What are you watching? There's lots to see today. You'll notice that he's very talkative, and this is to do with the fact that I had to hand rear him, so he will chat away at me as if I was also a little owl. Little owls are also a very sedentary species and they pair bond for life, so once they establish a territory they don't tend to move away from that. The young may move as far as 20 kilometres from their original territory, but once they're bonded they will stay with their partner for as long as they both survive. You're giving me a chance today. I'm super excited. I know. Although they're most active at dawn and dusk, you do see them in the daytime, and they are what we would class as a diurnal owl, so a daytime hunter, just like the hawks and falcons. A lot of people get the idea that all owls come out at night and are nocturnal, but actually that's not the case. There are a lot of diurnal owl species. Essentially, owls will be awake when their food's around, so if the mice come out in the day, then the owl will come out in the daytime. If they're more prevalent at night, then they'll come out at night. Where I used to live, we would regularly see wild little owls dotting in and out of the hedgerows, and that is really an ideal environment for them. Typically we find them on lowland farmland here in the UK, so they like hedgerows and trees, and they are a cavity nesting owl, so they will usually go into the holes in trees as an ideal nest spot. However, they adapt to human nest boxes very, very well, so putting up owl boxes can be really beneficial for these guys. They will also nest in orchards and in woodland areas, but it has to be quite open woodland, and they're not naturally a woodland bird. They're also, in case you haven't noticed, super vocal, and in the breeding season especially, the males like to establish their territory by shouting and warding off other little owls that might be in the area, and this doesn't quieten down during their breeding process. So really from late autumn, when they establish their territory, into the new year and onwards, we find that wild little owls will make a hell of a lot of noise, which is quite amazing considering how small they actually are. The other really interesting, unique thing about them is their flight. So we often think with owls of that very flat gliding flight that they make. However, little owls have more of an undulating flight. So you find that they glide, bob, and it's something very, very specific that if you see a little owl in the wild, you will notice that very unique flight pattern that they have. The little owl is the UK's smallest owl. However, if we look into Europe, you'll actually see that there are owls that are much smaller, including pygmy owls and Scops owls. Although they did initially very well, we're seeing that they're in decline. There might be as few as 5,000 pairs left in the wild here, and there are none in Ireland, very few in Scotland. Two of the most important issues for their survival is the availability of food and the weather conditions, and we're finding we're getting much longer drawn out wetter winters, which will limit their hunting and also increase their energy use, which means if they're not feeding properly or not catching enough food, they're going to struggle. And we're also seeing a decline in their habitat as well, as the land around us changes. So these guys are being left with more limited options about where they may be able to nest and breed. What I love about him as well are his stunning yellow eyes and that really grumpy looking face. A lot of people say how angry these little guys look. Unfortunately, that is just his face and he can't change it. Owls and other birds don't have any way to express their emotion through their face, instead it's all through their body language. And at the minute we can see he's looking around, he's not always looking at me, he's chatting, he's nice and round and fluffy, he's not drawing himself up all thin and scared, he's very, very relaxed. He looks like a little pom-pom, and to me that body language tells me that he's quite happy. There's nothing there. You're so grumpy. Oh. Hey. Hey. His markings are absolutely beautiful, and this basically is all camouflage. So these beautiful little speckles all over his body and his tail and on his chest as well help him to blend in. And if he was sat up in a tree, you would not be able to spot him because he would just be totally camouflaged. As always, thank you so much for joining me and Hiccup here. I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you all very soon.